Yeah. You're getting your stride.
Right now,
You know,
I'm
class.
in the small class,
End of the
yes,
year,
good
you
and
know,
small.
that's-
So
Oh,
that's
wow.
right here.
That's nice.
Wonderful. So right there,
All right, so
Ready.
what's new
That's
with
all,
your life
that's all
stage?
you have to do, I believe.
Ready for track.
Yeah. Hallway, when we're in
Uh-huh.
presentations.
You know, every time, of course, I got grandkids before.
Okay, all right, so you got this.
And so,
Yeah,
they,
I'm gonna go do the same before we start.
my grandkids come along, I always said.
4 o'clock,
the same thing.
17 minutes.
You love your spouse, you love your kids. You've never known love till you have grandkids.
I've already messed this up. Like the first time it popped
How
up,
did that happen?
it had the sign in it.
Under a lot of pressure, so it broke the skin. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds terrible. Oh, yeah. Well, we don't live, near the Buffalo anymore, but we do have a, we live in Bella Vista, which is just north of, sounds like you know it. Love living there. There's so much to do. Very active place. Got a big landscaping project
It had the
going
judge
on.
sign in page and then.
I work on things called.
Apps.
Okay.
And, you know, I want to. But I'm a good kid, I put it on fire.
Thank
Touch
you.
screen, by the way.
All right.
Uh-huh. Of all
It's happened.
things, yeah.
And then
Now, I'm really not like, yeah, right on the minute.
Right. Well, hold them up, make them want it more. Oh, yeah. He just wants to see if you were desperate for money.
Yeah, you're hard to hear.
how's your year gone this year? Good? Good. I was kind of hoping you'd be going to the conference with us again this summer.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to go, or I knew I took somebody's spot last year, so I didn't want to
I think it's usually high school staff, but still.
Yeah. That's fun. It was fun though. Are you going to GOCSD or whatever? Are you? Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the beginning of August? Yes.
Since we're getting more people in here, I just want to inform you guys we are under live feed, so anything you say or do will be seen or heard. Hello, Miss Allie. Is there anything I can help you with?
Is there anywhere specific I'm supposed to put this?
Well, let's see. I think that looks all right there. Just make sure it doesn't obscure your. That comes out. Make sure it doesn't obscure your slides. And. Sure. We do not have a table. Do we need a table? On a table now? Somebody else might have something they want to put on the table too. Is that gonna work for you?
It's just.
Well, 10 minutes, I guess that's something now.
I don't know. I don't think she had something.
That is right there. Anybody brings in something they need to sit down and sit there? I think it would probably look more secure over there, don't you?
Yeah.
Thanks, Amanda. I'm gonna go ahead and equip you with this. This is the mic. It's already on. It's recording live, so anything you say will be heard. Don't run off with it when you leave, because I gotta put it on the next person.
Sweet.
How's that?
Good. Do I need to move my hair?
I think it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Judges, are you all able to sign in? Were you all able to sign into the correct ID? Okay. 7 minutes.
Okay. Which one do I push?
To the right.
Can I try it really
Yep, go
quick?
ahead and try it.
Am I supposed to be inside the tape or behind it? Does it matter?
Inside of the tape is the recording zone.
'Kay.
So yes, inside the tape.
silence? What you're waiting for? You're waiting outside.
I'm okay with the awkward silence. I'm breathing. It's fine.
Good.
I can tell jokes if you guys want. I do impressions.
I'll tell you that I was your mom's biology teacher.
I'd love to. That's my biology teacher out there.
I loved her, and I don't know, she had
Some sister.
some
They look a little bit alike, I
Look a little bit
think.
alike.
He'll actually be telling me a story about Megan, not Rachel.
But I remember it. That dog's name, but Rowdy. Okay, I was thinking Bodie. Yeah.
I know, I miss Rowdy.
When Walmart is done, all of this. But theoretically, I can step outside my door, go walk down to the street, get on the Razorback Trail. And take it all.
You missed my stand-up comedy debut.
I did.
There was awkward silence, and I told them that I'd do impressions if they wanted.
There's just behind. I have that. New piece of artwork, a sculpture here.
Go digital, they wouldn't have that problem.
Yeah. Oh, there's just, yeah, there's so much going on. And even, it's not just
I noticed that
outside, but just out in the Rogers, and you have, I like their downtown better than Bentonville's downtown. It's really nice place, and you can walk around. Like all week, you know, it's just, there's the.
I think everybody was already in here when I said so earlier, but please make sure that your cell phones are silenced.
Hi.
I'm gonna have you tap the mic.
I've been coughing. I hope it's not too loud. Sorry. Oh, is it? Is that on there okay?
If it falls off, we'll just pick it up and just
Okay.
keep right on rolling.
We'll roll with the punches.
All right. It is now 4 o'clock. Ellie, whenever you're ready.
All right. Are my judges ready? In Matthew 28, Jesus is telling his disciples of the Great Commission to go out, be his hands and feet, and make disciples of all nations, and to do so by sharing a Christ-like love, kindness, and generosity. We are often willing to do this with people we can physically see are in need, like someone standing on the side of the road or maybe even in a parking lot holding a cardboard sign. However, the people that get overlooked far too often are pregnant women in need. Hi, my name is Allie Martin, and I believe that all women should have the necessary resources for proper prenatal care. I was inspired to do my project when I learned about pregnancy resource centers. Pregnancy resource centers are nonprofit organizations that are capable of offering limited medical care and counseling. Their mission statement is to provide love, support, and education to pregnant women, and that's exactly what they do. I knew that I wanted to work with such a deeply Christian-rooted organization to make a difference with my project. I not only wanted to learn more about them, but about the experience of a pregnant woman, so I started researching prenatal care. I learned that in order to ensure the health of her baby, a woman must ensure her own mental and physical health. She must handle the stress of making decisions to ensure her and her baby's health on a daily basis. From the first appointment, the stress is just added on a woman after every appointment because she is responsible for caring for herself and her unborn child. For a woman in the ideal situation, this can add a lot of stress, the ideal situation being mother, father, and baby. However, women in different situations start to question their own feelings about becoming a mother, their partner's feelings about becoming a parent, their home or financial situation, and this can be added strain on an already stressful situation. For those women in different situations, postpartum depression can have a greater effect. It can wreak havoc on their mental health. 1 in 7 women suffer from postpartum depression, and while not every woman suffers from it, all struggle in some way after having a baby. I wanted to give these women something that they could look at in times of joy or struggle and cling to hope and Christ-like love. So I reached out to my mentor. I told her I had this idea, and she said, I'm going to connect you with someone from the Pregnancy Resource Center because I think that this is a great idea and we can definitely make it happen. So I reached out to Teresa Presley and I asked her, would your women be interested in having some free maternity photos taken? She responded with a resounding yes and immediately talked to her women about being involved in this project. I had some ideas about how I wanted this project to go, what I wanted to happen, and so I started making those a reality. I talked to Shakota Wade about my project, and she actually said, I have these dresses. Would you be interested in offering them to the women for them to wear in the photo shoot? I was really, really grateful at this point. So then I had a meeting with Ashton Turnbull, Teresa Presley, and Shakota Wade. We worked out all the details. We carved out time slots for each of the women, and we picked a date. I was super excited to get this project in motion, and I couldn't wait for the day to come. I did work previously as Ashton Turnbull's mentor, and so I had a very minimal experience behind the camera and in a photography environment, but I had huge inspiration for this project. I knew that it could actually be something that made a difference in someone's life, even though it seems like it's just photographs to people looking on the outside. To them, that's something that they can treasure and think back to in times of struggle. I also knew that I wanted it to be an experience. I didn't want it to be like, there's this girl standing here telling me what I'm supposed to do. I wanted to talk to them, and I wanted to be their best friend by the time I left. I have no problem making friends anywhere I go, so I made sure that I made friends with each of the women I took photos of. I started to doubt myself and my capability behind the camera because I had such minor experience, but I read this quote that said, "Great photography is about depth of feeling, not depth of field," by Peter Adams. I had deep feeling for this project. I had deep inspiration, and I knew that I wanted it to be significant, not only in my life, but in the lives of the women that I was working with. Once I had taken the photos the day of the project, I sorted them each into galleries. I sat down with my mentor, Ashton Turnbull, and we spent the entire day editing the photos. She taught me the process on one photo and said, all right, it's all yours. I got to work with the editing software that she had. I learned about cropping, lighting, culling, all of it was really, really interesting to me, and I now have a new skill. Whenever I delivered the photos, I gave each of the women a handwritten message because I wanted it to feel like they were receiving a gift, not just a project. I feel like they really appreciated them, and they each responded to my message, which really touched me. Now, my project was very successful in my eyes and the eyes of the women that were involved. However, we did have some challenges along the way. The first one being weather and scheduling. The first date that we had scheduled for was in early October. However, when that day came, it poured rain all day long, and you can't really take photos out in the cloud and the rain, so we had to reschedule for early November. Of course, whenever you're working with a pregnant woman, you are on a very tight timeline. And because we had to reschedule, 2 of the women had actually delivered their babies. And as exciting as that was for them, I then had 2 empty spots that I had to fill for my project. I ended up having 2 women from the Pregnancy Resource Center, 1 woman that Ashton knew, and 2 women here from the school, one who had just had a baby a couple months previously, which added to my project because it wasn't just pregnant women then, it was motherhood too. I also got to involve 3 of the women's little girls in the photos, which made it that much more special because it really embodied motherhood as a whole. I also struggled with the sunset. Being new behind a camera, I knew that I needed to rush, and I had very specific 15-minute time slots that I couldn't go over and I didn't want to go under on. Whenever you're doing photography, you have a golden hour, and past that time, you have no viable light to take good photos. So I had until sunset was over to take my good photos. And being rushed already, that made me work really efficiently, and I did time management great that day. So once again, I learned a new skill. The last was my backdrop. The entire time that I was working on this project, I had an idea in my head of what I wanted the photos to look like. I had a backdrop picked out. I knew exactly how I wanted it to look and how it was going to be set up. However, when we got there the day of, the wind blew my backdrop over and broke it. I might have shed a tear after that, but we adapted and we ended up setting the props up in 3 different areas, which made the photos so much more unique. And in the end, I was really, really thankful that my plans had gotten changed because it ended up so much better. These are some of the photos that I'd taken. These are just a few of my favorites from each of the women's galleries. I was so glad that I was able to work with women from the Pregnancy Resource Center and from here in the school because that made the project that much more special and touching. I not only got to work with pregnant women, but women who were already in the midst of motherhood. I hope that I embodied Matthew 28 to them and that I showed a Christ-like love and that they can look at these pictures in times of joy or times of struggle and felt encouraged. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? Um, 6 hours probably.
So I'm interested in what kind of camera you use.
I used Ashton's camera that she professionally takes photos with. It is a Canon, I believe. And she helped me work on the settings so that they would be the best that they could be for that day. And the photos we printed at Walmart.
What was the best part of it?
The best part of my project was definitely connecting with each of the women because at first, you know, some of them were kind of standoffish. I knew 2 of them already, but the other 3 I didn't. And they were kind of standoffish, didn't really, you know, start a conversation. But me being my big personality, I started a conversation, and I feel like I became friends for the day with those women.
You mentioned several different new skills that you gained through this. What do you feel is going to be the most beneficial on to the next stage in your life?
Definitely like photography in a whole. I'm planning to go into cosmetology, and if you don't, you know, market your work, then nobody sees it. And taking good photos of the work that you do is really important. And so now I have professional skills to take into a different profession.
Everybody can relax now. Thank you. Eating earlier in the Bears Den, they had released all of you guys to go get your pizza. And I saw your mannequin in the corner of my eye, and I thought, what are you still doing here? Go get your pizza. It was not a real guy.
You got that reaction. Actually scared somebody with this today.
It is kind of scary looking. That's okay.
It's one of the elementaries is. Good actually. I took the arm and.
We could have a lot of fun with that thing. I mean, teachers' doors, so when they go in, get some ideas.
I've scared a lot of people with it over the month I've had it.
Put it in my room, I guess.
Oh, I used to sit with Casey Dougherty. and Tim
We're at
Spencer
about
the day after.
3 minutes. Just wanted to remind everybody who just came in, please make sure your cell phone is silenced. Peyton, I'm gonna mic you up. This is live, so don't say anything that you don't want anybody to hear. And let's put it down. Let's try it the other way.
Where did I stand? Like over there?
Within the white tape. So,
So I'm not in front of it the whole time? Should I move this stuff over?
yep, we can move that over. There we go. How's that?
I like it.
All right. To the right.
You said to the right?
Test it out if you'd like.
All right. Are my judges ready? I want you to think about your high school days. I want you to think about if you played sports, how that benefited you, especially now. Today we're going to talk about the benefits of high school athletics by Peyton Clinton. Now, there are many benefits to high school athletics. Now, some of those benefits are mental. It can benefit your mental health. And the way it can benefit your mental health is it can give you that outlook to release your negative energy into something productive. And it can also benefit you in your physical health. It can benefit you in your physical health because you're being proactive. You're getting up and moving around. With a lot of benefits can be just the 4 years in high school that you play. With 4 years of football, volleyball, or basketball, you'll develop memories. And with memories comes lifelong friends. In football, it's kind of, I know I've heard people call it like a band of brothers. So you'll have friendships with a bunch of your teammates and you develop lifelong friends. But with the benefits of sports, there are many risks to sports. So some common injuries are sprains and strains, bone or growth plate injury, repetitive motion injury, heat-related, and concussions. When I played football, I got like a couple of concussions, and when you get a concussion or any type of injury, you get sat out, and you don't get to play, you don't get to work out, you don't get to be proactive. I had a problem with that because when I got a concussion in football, I realized that is not what I want to be doing. So I decided to be productive in what I want to do. But with injuries comes parent worries. Just some parent worries would just be getting injured. And with getting injured, they also worry about you sitting out for the rest of the season. but there's ways to prevent risk. Some would be proper training. You gotta get trained right so you don't hurt yourself. And some proper training would be falling right. If you have no protective if you have no protective gear like helmets or pads, and you fall and hit the back of your head, you could be concussed or even die. I know in football, they were very heavily consistent on having a good stance. Because if you came off the line with your neck down, you could hit the back of your head and hurt your spine. Proper technique. Now, when I started football, I would end up using my forearms, and by the end of the year, I had like blood clots all down my forearms. So I had to figure out how to use my hands instead of my arms so I wouldn't get hurt. And the athletic training side of this would be weightlifting. Weightlifting can be very beneficial to strengthening your muscles and your ligaments so that you can do more and take more impact. Body conditioning is very important to this because if you're not stretched before any kind of like physical activity, it's very easy to rip something or pull something. Cardio is very important in any sport you do or any physical activity because if you don't have good cardio, you can get tired out and blown up and not be able to compete with others. Now, the way I tied my research of sports together is by every high school has a uniform for each sport. Take it for football. You have the school name with the number, and then sometimes on the back of the jersey will be the player's last name. So the way I tied this into a project was I'm a professional wrestler, and I made my own wrestling gear. So I'm going to take you through how I designed and how I put it on wrestling gear. So the first step of making gear is designing it. You have to figure out what you're making. For me, I had to figure out what I wanted. So I settled on this, which is my name in wrestling, Apex Prime. And the mountain is kind of like Mount Everest. So I figured out what I wanted and I designed it. For this was a quick one. This one was like the guy's name with the existing logo. And I just put some Halloween stuff on it because it was for a October show. So once I figured out the design, I just had to go out and buy a singlet and pants when I first designed the red one. So when I got back with the singlet, I measured it and I made sure that's what I wanted. I printed out a piece of paper with that logo and those measurements on there. And once I figured out that's what I wanted, I went to there's this big rack we have with a bunch of vinyl on it. I grabbed one of the red ones and I put it on what most people call a Cricut. And it's attached to this computer, which I load the logos to, and it cuts it out. But when it cuts it out, it leaves a bunch of the vinyl you don't need on it. So you take something like this with a needle on it, and you weave out what you don't need. So when I get done with that, I put the pants and the vinyl on top of the heat press. And on the heat press, there's a bunch of settings, but I put it to vinyl. And the first step is just the pants. It's like a preheat. Then the second one is the vinyl with this protective layer on top of it. And that's what kind of gets it started to form to the fabric. And the third one is taking that off and putting like a thin piece of wax paper on. And that's what fully sets it in. Once I got it all done, I laid it out like this, took a picture of it, and I was pretty proud of myself because this was my first set of gear. Now when I got home, I tried it on and it fell apart. So I had to get creative and fix it on the fly. So I took an iron and I ironed it back on, and it's held up pretty good. It hasn't fallen apart, and that was 8 months ago. My product 2, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to try a white toner, which is kind of like you're printing out a piece of paper, and it prints out this logo. It comes out, and you can just put it on the fabric and heat press it. When it did this, our machine was like leaving holes in it, so it was kind of like weird, and it didn't stick to the pants when I tried to heat press it, so it just all fell apart. So I had to get creative and I had to think something else. So I decided to go with our wide format printer, which is basically just a big piece of white vinyl going through, and the machine has ink in it. And we'll go down to one side of it where the ink is, collect what ink you need, and it goes back and forth printing what you load into the computer. And it also cuts it when you're done too. So when it's done, I just weaved it out, and this is what I got left with. So I started heat pressing it onto all this, and it was working a lot better. When I tried it on, it was still falling apart. I didn't have this part in here because I don't have any pictures, but my mother did go back and sew all of this because it's still falling apart, and it turned out looking pretty cool. This is me wearing it. It worked pretty good. Now my product 3 is just like my product 1. It's just cut vinyl. But this one was a lot harder because I decided to add more detail. So like this hand, for instance, it took me like a full day to fully weave out all the stuff I didn't need. Even then, I lost some of the detail because it would just break off and not be there. But once I got it heat pressed on there, it stayed good on the pants good, and it did good. My 4th one is like 1 and 3, except I layered a red on top of a white cut vinyl. And once I got it layered on top of each other, I heat pressed them on top of the singlet and pants. And it works really good, except I've ran into a problem where the red is like sliding off the white for some reason. And it's falling apart a little bit, so I have to iron it back on every time I wrestle, but it's held up really good. Now this is my product 1 in action. Now with me being athletic in all this, it held together really good. Didn't fall apart in a match. It stayed together pretty good. No. Better not. Some drinking there. This is my first match with the red put onto the gear, and it stayed together really good, which I'm proud of. Now this is the new one. This was the first show wearing it. It didn't fall apart. It stayed together pretty good. Even with me taking the singlet off, it didn't, tear. My thoughts are that high school sports can help you get a good foundation to keep a healthier lifestyle for the future. Do my judges have any questions?
Figure out why the first one did just kind of fall apart. What happened?
Actually, yeah. This singlet is the same as the first one. And when I heat pressed it on there, you can see where it's kind of got this stitching right here. It wasn't fully flat. So, or thinking back on it, I think it was like kind of keeping it off where it wasn't fully keeping it, because it only fell off right here. So when I got the iron on there, it fully got contact. So
I'm really curious how you had access to such sophisticated printing equipment.
I went down to Somo Tech, which we call Votech,
Okay.
and I was part of the commercial and advertising arts class.
Also, when you're talking about the benefits of athletics, what's your opinion on solo sports like track and field versus team sports?
I did try track, and I think it's good, even if you're in your own solo competition. I know when I did it, everyone in other sports, we're still a team at the end of the day. We just, when we got the time, we came together, had fun, and when we had to go to our own things, we all got serious, worked on what we needed to work on, and it worked good. So I think it's good.
I have another question. So what do other wrestlers do for their uniforms?
Well, I made some others, but
No, I mean other wrestlers, their uniforms.
well,
Like
some
their
were,
clothes.
yeah, some of them I've seen wear just normal clothes, and I've seen some just wear like we have people called lumberjacks, and they get their gear professionally made. It's kind of like overalls. So, but their gear is professionally made, and then some people you'll see, we'll call it like backyard wrestling, and they'll just wear like what I'm wearing now.
Where do you wrestle now?
I wrestle. I've wrestled for 2 companies, but my main one is American Championship Wrestling, and they're based out of the St. Louis area. But we did just have a show in Mountain Grove, April 6th, and we're got one in Rolla. I don't know. I don't know, but we do have one in Rolla. So
So if you had any materials to remake like your symbols on your clothes, would you stick with a similar option or would you go a completely different route?
with this logo,
Yeah, like if you want to put on more clothes, if you had all the options, would this be the best option or is there other options that work better? What do you think like the vinyls
the vinyl. Well, screen printing. If you do screen printing, which is ink, that's kind of for big projects like multiple things. So I would think vinyl's good. Just for wrestling gear, it can be really hard for it. It's kind of like this; it's falling off. So I know one on Instagram. I follow this one place called Main Event Gear, and I think they sew all their stuff together. So there is different ways than vinyl, just cloth getting sewed together. But for me, for like cheaper, I would say vinyl. Thank you.
Good. Relax. Yep, you're free to go. You are free.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it's pretty warm in here. Got it? Let's set that right there. Wonder, let me check your slideshow. It just came up with black. There it is. Okay.
Can you start it in the black slide?
Yes. Why don't you do it so you can practice using the clicker? Yep, that's backwards and that's forward. I'm gonna go ahead and equip you with the mic. It is live. How's that?
Good.
Okay. Everybody coming in, judges and just viewers, I'd like to remind you to please silence your cell phones. Oh. That's okay. About 3 minutes.
I see where it's at. Okay.
It's okay, you don't need to say hi to me. Well, I'm not gonna be quiet, how are you doing?
You guys have got 2 minutes to be as loud as you want.
In that case. I know. Don't be
And when
quiet.
you speak, just stay on that side of the white line, okay? That's
Oh.
the camera view. So turn your screen back on one more time. I would probably,
Go on this side.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think so. Judges, this is Jordan Rutledge, ID 2469. Has anybody had any difficulty getting?
I'm good to start whenever, right? Yeah. Are my judges ready? Picture this. You're 18 years old, getting ready to graduate, and you decide you want to start investing some of the money you've saved over the years. So you start by putting just $150 into the stock market every month and continue doing this throughout your job career. Now, it's 40 years later, retirement's coming up, but because of this, you have an extra $1 million in your bank account. Now, surely it's not that easy, right? Well, it might actually be. Hi, my name is Jordan Rutledge, and I believe that people of the younger generation right now should be taking advantage of their time and resources and learn to invest. Now, I'm sure a lot of you already know the basic idea of investing by purchasing something that may later be worth more at a different time and then selling it. And while it seems it's a pretty basic concept, it may not seem as well known to some of the younger generation nowadays, or at least it wasn't for me. And that was until last summer, whenever something particularly sparked my interest in the stock market, and I started to research about it. Now, one of the first things I ran into was the fact that at the time I was not yet 18 years old, and so with any sort of investing, you have to be 18 years or older, and I was not. And I figured there had to have been some sort of way around this, and surely enough, there was with something called a custodial brokerage account. Custodial brokerage account essentially lets you invest under your parents' name until you turn 18, and then whenever you turn 18, the assets are turned back under your name. A lot of the advice I learned about investing in the stock market applied to investing in general. First being to start early. Obviously, my project is focused around investing for younger adults or teenagers because having a 2 or 3 year head start in the stock market can be the difference of $15,000 or $20,000 down the road. Next, starting low. Obviously, with any new thing you're learning, especially with money involved, you don't want to go blowing all your money on some company you've never heard of. just for it to fail within the next week and then lose all of your money. And lastly, diversifying. This kind of goes along with starting low as far as playing the investing game safe. Whenever you disperse your money throughout different assets or stocks, you drastically lower the risk of losing your money in the event that one of those stocks fail. Now, when the time came to decide our research paper at the beginning of the year, I thought it would be cool to research some different macroeconomic factors and see how they affected the stock market. So the main three factors I researched about were inflation, interest rates, and unemployment. Inflation is a continual decrease in the value of money that is inevitable because of the constant money production. Higher inflation has been found to increase corporate profits, and affect most financial assets. Interest is a form of payment back to someone over time that you borrowed money from. Higher inflation has been found to lower bond prices but raise stock prices. Changes made to the natural interest rate are important to reach both long-term inflation and short-term stabilization of the economy. Unemployment, which is usually expressed as a percentage of people who are currently unemployed over people who are employed. Anytime unemployment is on the rise, the economy is usually falling with it. So for putting my research into effect, I figured it would only be appropriate that since my research was kind of separated into two parts, that my product or products would go along with it. So originally at the beginning of the year, I knew I wanted to do something directly in the stock market. So I decided to track a few different stocks, each at different risk levels, and see how they performed over a 5-month period. So I purchased 3 different stocks that are each technology stocks, just to keep it fair and because it is one of the best performing sectors in the stock market. So my low risk was Verizon, medium risk was Microsoft, and my high risk was NVIDIA. So over the 5-month period, Verizon, which is my low risk, had a beta rating, which a beta rating is the rating that shows the risk level of the stock. And then it had a 20% increase. Microsoft, which is my medium risk, had a beta rating of 0.9 and also went up 25%. And lastly, NVIDIA, which is my high risk stock, had a beta rating of 1.75 and went up 125%. So total across all 3, I had a 170% return from my original $300 investment, which is the same as making $170 over a 5-month period, which was pretty impressive, I think. And then obviously while all of this investing was going on, there was a 5-month period or so where I wasn't doing anything. And so to fill that time, I thought that making a kind of visual aid that beginners could use would be helpful. So I decided to make an investing guide brochure for teenagers and young adults. This is the front of it. It has the title, my name on it. The inside part I kept separated into 3 main sections. First, how to start investing. This talks about if you are already 18 and how to invest, or if you're under 18 and how to set up one of those custodial accounts I was talking about earlier. In the next section, types of assets to choose from. Obviously, my project is mostly focused around the stock market, but I know that investing in stocks may not be for everyone. So I listed a few different types of financial assets and definitions of what they all are. Then the last section, general investing advice. This is just good investing advice for stock market or any type of investing in general. And as you can see in the bold, there's stuff like diversifying, start low, start safe, which was stuff that was tied back to my research earlier. And then lastly, on the back, I put a few different links to different investing websites that also have helpful information. And while most of this went over pretty well, I did have my fair share of struggles that I ran into. First being the fact that I was originally not even supposed to do this project at the beginning of the year. I was going to do a project with Coach Miller, my baseball coach, and we were going to do that at the field. But when the time came to ask for permission from the city, we were denied, and I had to throw that out the window and come up with a whole new project within about 2 or 3 days, which was not fun. And that also included getting a new mentor, which was not a big problem at all. I ended up contacting one of my friends that is now in college, getting his degree in economics, and he said he would be my mentor. But since we were both going to school at the same time, we never really got to meet face to face, or not talk face to face, and so most of our contact was done over the phone or different video chats. And then lastly, calculating the stocks. Since I purchased the same amount or the same dollar amount for each of the stocks, it was different shares amounts for each of them. And when it came the time to calculate the percentage increase of the fractional shares, it was kind of a difficult time, and it took some hard math to figure it out, but I eventually got it all figured out. And I would say, all in all, I'm actually glad that I ended up doing this project. When it came to it, I ended up learning a lot about the different macroeconomic factors and how they indirectly affect the stock market. And it also really opened my eyes to just how easy investing can be, especially for those younger people who should be taking advantage of it and should go ahead and start learning how to invest right now. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? I printed some out. I can hand those out if you guys want to see some. I was, during the showcase, some students were asking for them, and I gave them to different students that asked for them.
I know what those first two stocks were, but what was the third one?
NVIDIA, they produce like different computer parts, and they're just a computer-based company that does different computer stuff. That's about all I know about it. NVIDIA, I've actually, well, besides the fact that all of them are technology stuff, I've invested in NVIDIA prior to this, like a while back, but separate from the account, from the project, and it's a good performing stock. It definitely surprised me. I mean, over the period of time and how much I made, it definitely surprised me. Yes, it could have, especially the high risk NVIDIA, that could have went bad. It was my money. It was.
When was the last time you looked at how they had out, or is it?
No, I still technically have them, but the money that I made from them, I'm actually going to write out a check and donate to the YMCA for kids sports. I haven't checked in a little bit, but I don't think they've changed much since the last time I checked. But yeah, it was maybe a week or so ago. Yeah. As far as a career path, probably not, but I do plan on investing for the rest of my days. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. You are free to go. Yeah.
Real slow reacting.
Wait, yeah, when it does the little
Oh, not on the
finger.
dot.
Yep. Yep.
Well, the dot should work.
I know the dot should work. It did work once.
I'm gonna mic you up. It is live feeding. How's that?
Good.
Give the clicker a try.
Alright.
And you're gonna have to stand on the inside of the tape.
Okay.
So if you need to
I can,
slide this over a little bit so you
Yeah.
can stand over here.
yeah, I'll stand over here.
About 7 minutes. Edge switching, so you got a few minutes to just relax.
Yeah, well, she does.
Do I have any time I got left?
Got about 4 minutes left. Brother or your parents, are you making them?
I actually don't know.
Well, I got a few minutes to get here.
What's nobody else wanted.
Right. Especially since we pay so much more for your doctor bills.
Yeah.
Hey, are you still in Arkansas?
I am.
Still working? Forest Service?
No, he's retired from the Park Service, but he works at a local bike store a couple days a week. Lake Ranger. We have like in Bella Vista. Kind of like takes care of all the boats and then does the control stuff. I'm a coach at Orange Syracuse.
Still running and doing all that.
Yeah, I'm not running well, but I'm running. You know, I was injured. I thought last year in Bentonville. I came out of it injured, and there's only one thing I can think of, and it's like that's not a cause of injury. I came out of it, and my legs were a mess. I've been concentrating more on strength training. I started running again before this year's half marathon, but then I was gone for a month in the middle to go to Africa to climb Kilimanjaro.
You're kidding, did you really?
Yeah.
My.
So, I mean, yes, I might have gotten some aerobic conditioning up down Kilimanjaro, but the rest of, 2.5 weeks after that, I mostly sat on my butt working.
You guys have been in here before. You know to turn off your cell phones and your live feed. You know that. Okay.
Anyway.
Are my judges ready?
Is 2456.
My judges ready? Ever since I was a little kid, I've always enjoyed two different things specifically. One of those being board games, and the other being the history. I've always played board games ever since I was little, starting about 3 or 4. I played chess, checkers, that sorts of thing. Just small things too. Nowadays, where I play things like Panzer Blitz, Axis and Allies, games that take hours and hours to play. I've always loved history, especially the history around modern era, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, those sorts of eras. So I thought, how could I combine those two and to do something for my senior project? Hello, my name is Jonathan Myers, and this is my project, War Games. Now I'm going to start with a brief overview of the Cold War. It begins after World War II ends, so around 1945, 1946. This is where it's considered to have started. It really begins whenever Berlin is taken, because that's when the real heavy clash between the U.S. and at the time the Soviet Union happened with idealisms. The war wasn't really a hot war. There was no fighting directly between the U.S. and Soviet Union. It was more, my idealisms are better than yours, so I don't like you. With the U.S. wanting capitalism, democracy, republic, all that sorts of things, more freedoms, less control. While Russians wanted communism, which they supposedly say was free, but it wasn't, and we didn't like that. We saw how oppressive it was, and their own people saw how oppressive it was, so they didn't like us because we showed their people that they could have something better than what they had. It ends in '84 with the removal of the wall. I say ends because it's widely considered that we never ended the Cold War. We just changed the name of who we didn't like. It went from the Soviet Union to the Russian Federation. We still don't like each other to this day. The biggest thing of the Cold War was proxy wars. Now, a proxy war is where the countries that are involved aren't direct. They don't have to be necessarily directly fighting. So for the Cold War specifically, things like Vietnam, Korea, Cuba, we weren't directly involved in the fightings per se. We were more influencing the outside forces and giving them funding and training to do it for us. So the future impacts of proxy war, Vietnam to this day is still controlled by communism. After we pulled out, the South Vietnam fell and was overrun by the communists. Korea is still at war to this day. They never actually signed a treaty. It was only temporary peace to talk about a potential future solution, but no future solution was ever signed. So they are actually still at war. Cuba is no longer communist, but they still don't like the U.S. They still have disdain for us. So some heavy important events. I wanted to focus on Berlin specifically because that's where all of this really started, was Berlin. It's the major center of all the idealistic fighting. So when you look at the sides, there was East and West, East being controlled by the Russians, West being controlled by technically all the Allied powers from World War II, but it was mainly the US. We had the most control over that sector. So it began around 1950 with the Berlin blockade, where the Russians cut off their supplies to Berlin, to the western side. They cut it all off. Here it almost escalated beyond a Cold War to an actual conflict when a tank crew almost opened fire on the Soviets attempting to block the roads. They were told to stand down, so the city was blockaded. To get around this, we had to invent something completely new. We attempted something called the Berlin Airlift. The first drop was, I think, 100 tons of supplies. There were 3 U.S. airmen, though, that died during this push. This helped kind of show to the rest of the world we were committed to stopping the spread of communism, and we were willing to stand up for everyone else. This is where the term the peace police came for the U.S. It's how we got that kind of nomenclature. It came from this. So many of the technological projects I was talking about were sabotaged. So things like the Manhattan Project, we know, was heavily spied upon by the Russians. As soon as we dropped the 2 bombs in Japan, they were already testing their own. So it was widely known that they were already watching us from even before the Cold War started. They were already watching what we were doing. So I thought, how could I take these ideas of all these technological advancements and all the sabotage and espionage and put it into a game? So the idea behind the game was I made it to inform people about the Cold War in a way that wasn't too dry and bland, but also was still informative so that you knew what was happening. So I thought, how could I do that? Well, for the first thing I made were these leader cards here. They show kind of a general biography of the leader themselves, when they died, what position they held. It also shows some small descriptors of what they did. So on my Khrushchev thing, it was de-Stalinization. He was known for kind of getting rid of some of those Stalinized policies and making it a little bit more free. So his, down here at the bottom, his statistics, which influence the actual game itself, his influence is higher than most. His own people prefer him to other people. The next thing I made were scenario cards, these things. These are actually based on scenarios that happened, such as some rebuilding efforts in Berlin. These are tied to the leader abilities by how high it is they would succeed based on what they did. I chose to do that because it would help kind of tie together what these leaders were like and what they actually were doing to help rebuild after World War II. It also shows how kind of cluttered and chaotic the time was during Cold War, and how everything was so clustered together. So overall, I made these character pieces. These are 3D printed. I designed them all in a software and 3D printed them. I had some complications with that, which I will go in detail later. I also made leader cards, as I said, these scenario cards, the game board itself, and some scenario markers, which are these. Unlike that one, which I used to actually built upon, this one I use a different kind of style to engrave the actual S into the circle itself, so that it would be easier to make and reproduce for other people. So one thing I began this project for, and something I focused on, was that I wanted it to find a way to do this so other people could copy me and make their own versions and inspire other people to do something. So I thought, what could I do? Well, I could reduce the cost of how to do this. So I used all resources from the school itself. The 3D printing stuff came from Mr. Knapp's engineering class. I learned it all in there, used all his software and his resources that he would let me use to 3D print everything I needed. I used some cardstock from the school let me use and their lamentation machine to lamentate everything. So it all last a while, be very durable, it wouldn't get damaged, and it could be reproduced by someone else who wanted to make something similar. I had a lot of complications, well, a couple, but they were pretty major setbacks. The first being the redesigns, as I mentioned. Those pieces, I had to redesign them several times. One was so small you could set it on the tip of your finger and it would just stay there. It was that small. So I also had another one that had a hole in the bottom so the cards would fall straight through. I had some that were too small and too thin, some that were too wide. I had one where the marker itself had a hole straight through it, or the S was all the way through instead of just a little bit. This helped me kind of push me to learn the software better, so I got way more familiar with how it actually worked, how to perfectly kind of measure everything, which also helped me learn how to use calipers better, get more precise with every little measurement. The next thing was I couldn't work from my own home. All of this was online, like all my files and everything are online, because the idea was I could publish it somewhere and people could use it. Well, all this online, I had no Wi-Fi at my own house from about August when we started to about the end of January. So I had to do this all at school itself whenever I got free time. This helped push me to be more aggressive with my project. I was doing way more in such a little time so that I could all get it done ready. In the end, I just wanted to show people how big the Cold War was, how important it is, how much impact it has today. All the precedents set here have left quite the imprint on our modern world, and I figured this would be the best way to show it without being too boring. Do my judges have any questions?
So I'm wondering, how did you decide what information on the cards versus what to be left out?
Some more important things, such as like rebuilding Berlin itself, and also added some smaller projects that weren't so well heard of, but did have quite a big impact, like Project Nike, a project that was originally was using to build rockets for space engines, but then was repurposed into ballistic missiles. But it furthered that, and I wanted to show that there were big projects that everyone have heard of, but also smaller things that were constantly going on that were important to how cluttered it was and why it was also chaotic at that time.
As you played the game, how many times would you say that you played it yourself or with others?
I actually haven't played it. I didn't get the rules all kind of cleaned out all the way. I was still kind of working on those a little bit. I have some basic ground rules that were just kind of there, but other than that, I haven't gone too in depth like something more advanced because that would take a lot longer. I found out games take a lot longer than you think to make them. Roughly, some companies say between 1 to 3 years for brainstorming, researching, getting funding, and then creating it. So I went in with that kind of idea to get as much as I could and make it as quality as I could without making something poor and making too little. That was the idea.
Only since at least 3 of us here have lived through it. What is there one particular event during the Cold War that you could point to that was probably the scariest time in the world?
The Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s, commonly referred to as the Missiles of October. When in October there were U.S. recon planes that flew over Cuba and discovered Soviet installations being built on the island, and those talks between Kennedy and Khrushchev trying to disarm the situation, which ended with the de-armamization of Turkey and Cuba, so that neither side would go to that point of escalating it too far. I could point there, that's definitely the scariest. That we were right on the edge that whole time. We went to, if I correct, DEFCON 2, the Pentagon, right before essentially the worst case.
It's funny now, but that's kids at that time in school were taught to get underneath their desk in case.
Yep, I remember that. Yep, I've seen those everywhere. I've seen some of those when I was researching.
Yeah, there you go.
Do you think we're capable of
Yeah, I think we can learn to respect each other a little bit more, but also do not push too far. Don't be too greedy and over. We're all in this together. There's no point in fighting each other for something that needs to be done. Like Berlin, we fought over something that we were going to rebuild. It's everyone wants to rebuild the world, but we all have different ways of doing it, which is where we fight, and I think we should change those. As I was hoping this will show us that like something like the Cuban Missile Crisis, we did come together to stop that, stop the world from ending that day. I'm hoping we can learn from things like that to kind of show we can work together. Thank you.
All right, you are free to go. Good job. You too, John. See ya.
How does this go on? Just
That or I have info here.
I just clicked on senior project judging it.
Perfect. Okay. Oh, you just set yourself up. I didn't even
Yeah.
need to help you. I would like to remind everybody, some people just came in, we are live streaming, that is audio and video, and please, if you haven't already, make sure you silence your cell phones. So, you're gonna need to stay inside the white line. So
Okay.
why don't we move this over a little bit?
okay.
That way you'll have a little nook right there. How's that?
So like right here, I can do that.
I think so. You guys can cut this. You okay?
Sweet.
Alright, we still got about 4 minutes.
Okay.
Judges, this is Luke Mansfield, ID number 2447. Please let me know if you're unable to find where you need to be. There's another Jane coming. I didn't know her.
Okay. Are my judges ready? In an ever-changing world, money is a source of opportunity for many people. However, with the financial state of our world being so sporadic, an opportunity can either be created or destroyed within seconds. This financial change can result in many, if not numerous, difficulties for children. Studies show that financial conditions, or financial instances, whether big or small, can dramatically affect a child. Children are at the age in their lives where they need to grow. They need to eat, they need to sleep, they have a roof over their head. Their parents need to have a job, and they need to be involved in school and outside of school in order for proper mental and physical growth. One way a child can grow mentally and physically is through extracurricular involvement. However, extracurricular involvement has decreased dramatically through the years. Part of that decrease can be attributed to the lack of funding in those school programs. Hello, my name is Luke Mansfield, and with that lack of funding, schools and communities must come up with a better way to fund these programs for their students. Now, before we go over funding extracurriculars for students, we need to go over what are some of the importance of extracurriculars. Well, there are 4 main benefits of an extracurricular on a child, and those are your physical benefits, your mental benefits, your social benefits, and your academic benefits. But first, let's look at our physical benefits. Whenever kids are in extracurriculars, such as sports, dance, martial arts, etc., they can decrease conditions such as obesity, depression, metabolic syndrome, high blood sugar, and even high cholesterol. Kids that are not in extracurriculars are more likely to have those conditions over kids that are in extracurriculars. Our next benefit is mental health. Now, as I mentioned earlier, depression can be decreased by being extracurricular. So it only makes sense how your mental health will be improved. It is a scientific fact that when your physical health is good, your mental health is going to be good. When your body is good and you're feeling good about yourself, your brain is going to be very happy. Our next benefit are going to be your social benefits. Now, this is a little bit more complex because we're all different people, so we all have different minds. However, it can be mainly clumped up into 3 categories that are leadership, cooperation, and peer interaction. Being an extracurricular, such as a club, can increase peer interaction and community and give kids different kids to talk to. And it also increases academic success. Now, while that might come as a shock, because sometimes athletes aren't most known to be the smartest in the school, actually statistics do show that being an extracurricular actually increases academic success and attendance in high school. So it seems like extracurriculars have many and numerous benefits for kids. So why isn't every kid an extracurricular? It seems like extracurriculars are that magical little element that can make or break a kid. Well, according to the US Census, only 57% of kids between the ages of 6 and 17 are an extracurricular. Why is that? Is America inherently lazy? Are kids too busy? Well, what is the answer? Well, studies have been done for decades, and a lot of them point to economic situations. When we look at economic situations, we're going to look at 3 economic factors, and that's going to be poverty, income, and employment. First, we're going to look at poverty. All across America, there are the have and there are the have-nots. Southern Missouri is primarily a have-not area. In Howell County, there are 39,000 people. Of those, 9,400 are under 18, 22,000 are 18 to 64, and 7,400 are 65 and older. Now, of minors, 30.9% of those are impoverished. Of the working class, 22.8% of them are impoverished. And of the retired folk, 18.1% of them are impoverished. It is very difficult to miss that 30.9% of school-age children are impoverished. That means, theoretically, for every 10 kids sitting in a classroom, 3 of those kids are in an impoverished state. Our next factor is income. The federal income level is $13,590. And every time an individual is added to a household, that increases by $4,720. I have included the median values and the poverty values along with those respective subcategories. The poverty rates for non-families is 34.6%. For families, it is 10.5%. And for married couple families, it is 6.1%. Our last economic factor is employment. Howell County has not had the best employment,
with only 53% of its citizens having a job. 47% of its citizens are not in the labor force, and 5.2 of its citizens, or 5.2% of its citizens, are unemployed. Now, as a side note, not in the labor force and unemployed are two different things. Not in the labor force means that somebody is not working and they are not looking for a job. So such as your retired people or your stay-at-home parent, etc. Unemployed means that somebody is not working and they are looking for a job. So a higher unemployment rate shows that there are not enough jobs to accompany a certain area. It is again really difficult to miss that 53% of the population in Howell County is working. So what does that mean? Well, it shows that the whole county is being supported by only half of its citizens. No wonder the poverty rate is so high. So why does this matter? Well, this just shows that Howell County is a have-not county. With only 53% of its citizens having a job, there is no wonder why poverty is so high. There is no wonder why income is so low, and there is no wonder why unemployment is so high. Howell County is a very poor county, and this is seen through our statistics. It is also seen, that poorness is also seen through our school district. With 3/10 of our students being impoverished, more than half of them on the free and reduced lunch program, and the food bag program pushing out more food than ever, I see these problems every day walking through the school. So I decided as a senior project, I was going to try to fix that, or I was going to try to maybe contribute a little bit. I decided that I was going to get some money for the band program so I can increase extracurricular involvement there. As I mentioned earlier, extracurriculars are important for a child's mental and physical growth. I remember getting into a discussion last year with the band director over fundraising, and I basically got into a very mild disagreement, and I basically asked them, hey, can we write a grant? And then I was told right then and there that I should write a grant. So I did. But before we go over what the grants I did, what is a grant? Well, a grant is basically a sum of money given to an individual or a charity for a specific purpose. Now, I forgot my $10 bill in my duffel bag, but let's say I had a $10 bill right here. Okay, if I were to ask you guys who wants this $10 bill, okay, you guys, it's free. Pretty much a lot of you guys would want a free $10 bill. So of those people that wanted that free $10 bill, I'd ask them, okay, give me a reason why you want that $10 bill. Once you guys all give me your reasons and I've sorted through all of them, I would give that $10 bill to whoever I see most fit to have that $10 bill. That is what a grant is. There's all that money sitting out there for a purpose, and all your job as the grant writer is to show those people and to tell them why you need that money over everybody else. In my instance, I was going to get money for the band program so we could buy instruments for kids that cannot afford them. The first grant, I did 3 grants, and the first of those 3 was one from the National Endowment for the Arts. This is a $20,000 grant, and this was my big ticket grant. Basically, it was a 50-50 match grant, so the school would pay for $10,000 of it, and the organization would pay for $10,000 of it. Since the school had to pay for some of it, I had to go to the board meetings, and I had to present and basically ask them for budgetary approval. I couldn't start without that. Once they finally approved the budget for setting aside $10,000, I was finally able to start in about April time, about this time last year on the NEA grant. I spent a lot of time with Ms. Bryant and Dr. Spence, getting a lot of budget information and having them sign off on a lot of stuff. After, I'd say about 2 or 3 weeks of just back and forth with Ms. Bryant and Dr. Spence, I finally submitted the grant on May 16th, 2023. And I felt pretty good about the grant. I thought I did a really good job, and I thought with everybody and all the knowledgeable people helping me, I had a good chance of getting it. However, I was rejected on December 19th, 2023. And I'm not gonna lie, that kind of hurt a little bit. The next grant I did was from the Walker Charitable Foundation. Now this is a little bit more simpler of a grant. It was an essay-styled grant. So this could include my mentor a little bit more, since that was his specialties. Basically, I ended up calling them 30 days in advance to find out that I was eligible for funding. Once I was eligible, I was able to start. I started my essay, and basically if I was sending back my essay back and forth with my mentor, and that probably went on for about 5 to 10 times, just revising and editing the essay. I submitted the grant on September 29th, 2023, and the final decision is still pending. That decision will come out in June. My third and final grant is from the Mockingbird Foundation. Now this is a very competitive grant. With only about, of its 700 applications, they only fund 10 of them. That's a 7% success rate. So with the odds against me, I decided that I was just going to focus on this one a little bit more and give it my all. So I started in November, even though it was due in January. This is another kind of essay style grant. So this is a lot of including my mentor also. I submitted the grant on January 19th, 2024. And I really didn't feel too good about it, but at the same time, I knew that I did my best. And I was rejected on March 22nd, 2024. And that really didn't come as a surprise because the odds were against me, as I knew from the beginning. This project was very challenging in and of itself. I knew it was going to be, I knew it was going to be challenging from the very get-go, but I didn't know it was going to be that challenging. I've never navigated government websites. I've never been in charge of scheduling meetings. I've never been in charge of such a big task. So I had to learn all that new stuff. And also, getting pre-approval was tough in of itself because not every day a senior English teacher is going to get asked, hey, can I write grants for a senior project, like starting now? Okay, so that just doesn't happen every day for English teachers. So they really didn't believe me. So I kind of had to convince them that yes, I am going to do this. I promise. I'm not pulling your leg here. Just recently, FFA received a $20,000 grant from the state, and that's great. And I think that every organization in the school and every organization around the world should see that there's all this money sitting out there for a specific purpose, and all you have to do is just apply. Because what are they going to say? No, and you're not losing anything. Okay, and the benefits are amazing, especially when it's for the children. Grants have and will always be a solution for many schools and communities who cannot fund programs that are needed for their children. Thank you, and do my judges have any questions?
Think you'll write grants in the future for any type of?
Yes, I would.
You would come back to write one for school, again, for try other ones for like band instruments?
Yeah, I totally could. Yeah, I would obviously need to see if it worked in my schedule because having this, I spent a lot, it was convenient being a student and just being able to walk over 100 yards to be with Miss Bryan, Dr. Spence. But let's say I have a job somewhere, I wouldn't be able to just be that easily go over and get all that information from them. So yes.
When you received your notices of rejection,
Mhm.
I know that a lot of times grants ask for kind of like different criteria.
Mhm.
So could you discuss maybe what the different criteria were? But I was also wondering, was there something in common that they said why they decided not to?
So as for criteria, they were all pretty much the same criteria. Okay, it had to be a 501c3, so it had to be basically a charity or something that doesn't claim any profit. Okay, and it also had to be for band programs. I think for the NEA one, it had to be showing that we live in a, what was the word they used? Disadvantaged community. Okay, so yes, there was criteria. Now, as for the rejections on why they rejected me, it's kind of like a college rejection. Yeah, but like it's kind of like a college rejection letter. They give you the same thing. Oh, well, we looked at a whole bunch of great people, and we really just didn't think that, and while you would have been a great admission, we just didn't have enough room. So basically, they kind of gave the same. We would love to fund every project, but if you really think about it, we can only fund 7% of them. So it was the same thing. So there was no like, oh, you could have done this, you could have done this. So yeah.
It'd be nice to know specific.
It would. It really would. Yes.
Considered mentoring with a younger high school student for maybe next year to continue looking for grants. There's things like Community Foundation of Ozarks that.
Well, I have not considered that because I am going up to college in the fall. So that might be kind of an inconvenience trying to help this kid succeed with their senior project and at the same time work with college. So granted, if the opportunity presented itself and a kid asked me and I had room in my schedule, I would totally do that, yes. But I would by no means consider myself an expert in that field.
So I'm wondering, you've written papers in other language arts classes, and you had your research paper for this project. I'm wondering if there were any different lessons that you learned about writing for these books. Like, were there different skills or, was there a different mental process in writing these grants that you didn't use writing straight up?
Yes. Okay, I see what you're saying now. So, like in school, we're taught to do this, but okay. So with grants, basically in school, I kind of noticed we're kind of teach to get the word count. Okay. With grants, there is a word count, and you're supposed to get your point across in 100 words or 200 words. So I basically had to learn how to take a 20-word sentence and cut it down to a 13-word sentence. So I had to learn about grammaticals, fixing that. I also had to learn how to make my deal more appealing to judge's eye or applicant viewer's eye, because they don't care if I was a 17-year-old filling out a grant. They see what they need. They're worried about the money. They're not worried about, oh, well, this is a young grant writer. We should give him a chance. Okay. So I basically had to learn all this new grant writing stuff. It's not the same as school. So I had to learn how to write sentences the way an adult does, not a high schooler. I had to learn how to cut down sentences. And I also had to learn how to not say the same thing over and over and over again. So let's say there were two similarly close prompts. I would have to take one of them, say something completely different than the other one. So they got two sides instead of just the same story. So yeah. Are there any more questions? All right.
You're
Well,
free
Thank you. Free as of now.
as of now.
Opposite of him because he's stepping back and forth. Stepping
Couldn't see
behind
him.
the poster.
Okay.
And that could deflect on the.
Okay, we'll do. Before it automatically went back, so cross your fingers. Yes, like that. There you go. So you're How are you?
I'm fine.
Into it. Oh, did you? Like that.
Rainbow Springs.
Oh, he told me about going there. He said it was pretty neat. Well, he asked me if I knew where that was. Where the Blue Ribbon Fishing area starts.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to put it because I think we want your poster in the video, and the video was within the white lines, but somebody who was in here last time said that they were behind the poster and they couldn't see the person. Let's try this. I moved the, oh, will you grab that? Let's try to put it over here. We want it inside the tape, but we don't want you behind it. Perfect. What do you guys think? Does that look good? Okay, let's mic you up. You look beautiful. You're going to do a great job. Left and right. I just want to remind everybody coming in, please make sure that your cell phones are silenced, and we are live streaming, so anything we say will be recorded for others to see. Come on in.
Are my judges ready? Poverty occurs within a family when a family's total income is smaller than the threshold set by the U.S. Census Bureau. Being poor can create a number of problems for a family, including their living conditions, their children's school experiences, food insecurity, and so many more. And as of the year 2000, the U.S. Census stated that close to 50 million Americans were living in a household that had a difficult time meeting their basic needs. And at least 3 million of those people had fallen so deep into poverty that within the next 2 years, they ended up becoming homeless. Hello, my name is Allison Pearson, and family poverty is a problem in society that affects kids in all areas of life, and there needs to be more resources available to help them succeed. And since we live in a highly impoverished area, I created a back-to-school fair that would show all the families of the school what was available to them in the area if they needed help with anything in their life. And so imagine that you are a single parent who had to drop out of school to take care of your child born with a disability. You couldn't go back to get your GED, nor could you go back to go to college. You were always prioritizing your child's health and benefit needs, child's and treatment needs above your own, so you couldn't go to work most of the time, and you had to bounce around from job to job. But since you could barely afford a small apartment and your child's treatments, you also couldn't afford a cell phone to contact your job on the days that you couldn't come in to work. And so, since you couldn't contact your job, you kept getting fired from all your jobs. And so you finally found a company that was hiring, but the only position available within the company was for the night shift. And you would get to take care of your child during the day, but you would have to get used to sleeping for only 2 hours a day. Or you would take your child to daycare for the day, but that was also something you couldn't fit in your budget. And on top of all that, you still had to pay for groceries, your laundry, your monthly bills, and so many other expenses. Starting in the 90s, being employed was no longer a guarantee of not falling into poverty. There was a fall that put real wages on the lower end of the gap between high and low incomes. Parents have had to work non-standard schedules just to see a change in their work status. They have had to work late nights, long hours, night shifts, or even on weekends just to make a living wage with great benefits. And multiple have even had to work weekends just to make ends meet for their families. And then for a long time, the Black family has been a significance of controversy and has been a topic of significance and controversy in American sociology. The rate for Black college-educated households in 1980 was at 2%. In the same year for white college-educated households, it was at 8%. Then 10 years later, in 1990, the rate for Black college-educated households was a little over 9%. And then the same year for white-educated households, it was already up to 32%. This is most likely the result from segregation several generations back, and it just kept getting passed down. And the pandemic made the subpar support worse for families with low income. It did not bring about any new flaws in state assistance, but it made the problems worse that were already there. And since a majority of the working population does not have the ability to work from home, most could not work for 5 months. And so most of the time, the only houses that these families can afford are sadly run down or falling apart. And it is becoming harder every year to pay for a standard home because of inflation. And then how a child views school earlier on could have an everlasting impact on how much they will decide to care for it in the future. And then these kids might come to school with cheap or torn clothing or even a little dirty. And if it's evident in their appearance, then it could sadly lead to bullying, which can be a disruption to their education. And then another problem for these families is providing a nutritious and adequate diet for their children. These problems have been recognized by both federal and state governments who have provided these families with various resources and programs to help them with food assistance. Food insecurity happens in families whenever they have to drastically cut meal size because of the lack of funds. And an inadequate diet can be a danger to a child's general health because it has been linked to asthma, dental problems. And so without a few $1,000s in savings, these families can't afford a nice home or own a small business. And so in 1998, the government passed the Assets for Independence Act, and this was made for creating funds for community-based savings programs that matched $2 for every $1 saved in an account, so these families would have more money saved than they originally had. And these accounts are called individual development accounts. They are for individuals or families who have an earned income that lies at or below 200% of the federal poverty line. And these accounts seem to be more attractive for families with children because there have been at least 73% of these families have had one child at the time of their enrollment. And so most people already have an idea of what they want to research before they do their product, but for me, it was the opposite. I only had a vague idea of what these families went through on a daily basis because I was always so fortunate to be able to live with both parents who both had stable jobs, and we had some money to get by. But after researching, I now understand what these families go through on a daily basis. So I didn't know what I wanted to do for my project, but I wanted to do something that would benefit the community and also something that hasn't really been done before. And so the person who ended up becoming my mentor came to me about an idea for a project, which was a community resource event at our school's open house, so all the families of the school can see what is available to them in the area. So I had finally found what I was looking for. So July was the month that I did the most planning, and there was a span of 3 days where I just called people. In the first 2 days, I called a total of 28 organizations. And then one of the organizations that said that they would come was the health department. So my mentor and I had to go have a meeting with Dr. Spence because they were going to bring their large mobile van because they were going to give immunizations to kids for the upcoming school year. And then the next day, I called 6 more organizations. And later in the month, I wrote emails to all the organizations who said they would come so they would know all the details. And then I also started calling food trucks for my event. And then in August, everything was finally starting to come together. But I had to meet with maintenance about tables because we needed about 20 of those. And then when the big day finally arrived, it was so relieving to see all the hard work that I put into this pay off. And then several of the organizations that came were mental health centers, rehab centers, early childhood centers, and local law enforcement, and a career center who helps people find jobs. And like I said, the health department came. And then in October, I started calling more food trucks to see if they would come to our parent-teacher conferences. But this was during the middle of the week, during the school year, so a lot of these people had already made plans, but there was only one food truck able to come. And then once open house and parent-teacher conferences were over, I started to write thank you cards to all the organizations and to all the people that made food for my event, because without them, it would not have been possible. And then I experienced a lot of challenges with my project along the way. The first off being having to call so many different organizations. And most of them were on break whenever I had initially called, so I had to call most of them back. And calling doesn't seem like a big deal, but to my generation it is, because we grew up with texting instead. And then while most organizations got back with me because they were off their break, some unfortunately never did. And and I learned that in the real world, some people may just never get back with you. And I also had to learn about being a leader because I am the kind of person who likes to be told what to do and when to do it. And so whenever I would try to ask my mentor about what to do on something, she would keep telling me that everything was up to me. So I really had to learn how to step out of my comfort zone with this. And so overall, I think I learned a little bit more about what it was like to be an adult. So imagine once again that you were that single parent who had to drop out of school to take care of your child. You heard that Medicaid would pay for all of your child's treatment expenses if you qualified for it. And so you did apply for it and you did qualify. And you also found a career center who provided you with a computer. And through that, you were able to find a job that would let you work from home with no prior education needed. So now that you get to stay at home with your child and have a stable job, and you don't have to worry about no more of your expenses. So now that your child will get to grow up in a better home life, they will now have the opportunity to succeed in the future. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? Yes?
How do you feel like the families that came to the open house reacted to what you had available?
I mean, I did see a lot of the families like interact with all the people who came. So I think that they were able to get into touch with these organizations.
Are you going to pass it on to anyone else to do again next year?
Sure.
Was there any certain resource that people seemed to use a lot? Like
I didn't
regions or
really notice one that stood out. I just noticed that they were like going to all of them.
If you had it to do over again, would you do anything different?
Get more experience at talking on the phone.
What was the best part of your project?
Seeing all of it pay off, probably. Seeing that families getting to interact with these organizations. Yes?
I'm wondering, did you receive any feedback from the organizations after the event? Like, oh, we're really glad we came because.
I mean, at the end of my event, there were some that told me that they were glad that they were able to come.
After all your research on poverty, is there anything that stands out as being effective?
Like,
Do you feel strongly about that it's being done right, or things that we need to do better?
I mean, I just think that these families should be able to like have access to all of these resources if they need them. Yes?
What, do you think it's just pure, like, lack of knowledge that has kept them from accessing these resources? Or do you think that once it was there and easy for them to reach, that they're like, oh, now
Yeah, I believe that some of these families did not know that these organizations were around in the area. And that now that they know, yeah, I hope that they're able to get the help that they need.
So do you have any idea for suggestions so that people don't have to find out about it at a once-a-year event? That information about these resources could be made available?
I mean, we could probably just like advertise these organizations at school more.
You are free to go. It's all over. Going to Grimes. There's a set of bathrooms right there, right there.
Oh, yeah, privacy. Yeah.
We don't want you hiding behind it. When you present, you'll be over here because you want to be within these white lines.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna mic you up. For those of you who just came in, I wanted to remind everybody we are live streaming, so anything you say or do is being live streamed right now. And please, if you haven't already, silence your cell phones. Test it out.
Oh, it's one of these.
Got 3 more minutes.
Of course, you want in here. Okay. I just want to lean back against this board and just do it like this. Now I'm in here, not really. I mean, I know most faces. 4 or 5 teachers and 1 band student. Are my judges ready? Do you remember the first time you actually sat down and listened to the lyrics of a song? Did it have a special meaning to it? Did it speak to you? My name is Dylan Gearhart, and a lot of you know that I love music, but I also love history, so I would like to share with you some history of rock and roll looking towards the 50s throughout the 60s, and I'm going to talk about the influence of that along with the cultural impact of it. It has been proven with music that it has been shown to break down certain boundaries or help speed up the healing process. Depending on what you listen to, it's been proven it can help you in a good way or it can help you in a bad way. Like, for example, a bad way would be like Charles Manson did with Helter Skelter with the Beatles. And with that being said, music has had a astounding effect in culture, especially in the 60s, which we will talk about in a moment. But before we can get to the 60s, we have to go back to the 50s and see how we got here. So in the early 50s, you had toe tapping, finger snapping, crooning ballads of, say, Patti Page or Nat King Cole and Joe Stafford. It's just simple, lovey-dovey ballads, boring. And in 1954, there was a group called The Comets with Bill Haley, and they released a song called Rock Around the Clock. And it was considered a fast-paced rhythm and blues. Rhythm and blues being one of the genres of three popular ones, which would be rhythm and blues, easy listening, doo-wop, and country, so forth, excuse me. And rhythm and blues was not really played a lot in the 50s because it was frowned upon. Because, as you know, in the 50s, a lot of things were segregated, and rhythm and blues was primarily played by colored musicians. But in 1957, Richard Clark, most famously known as Dick Clark, who was a disc jockey in Philadelphia, had his own TV show called American Bandstand. And he invited Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers on there so Frankie Lyman could sing the song Little Bitty Pretty One. This is actually on YouTube, so you can go watch it out for yourself. But as you can tell, the people are not happy that he is a colored person in an all-white theater, because at that time you didn't mix anything. But it made national headlines. No Negroes on Bandstand Show. TV boss says they're welcome. Negroes crack barrier of Bandstand TV show. And rhythm and blues kind of made its way into what we now know as rock and roll. And it has influenced a lot of people, like, you know, Little Richard or Fats Domino and Mr. Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was one of the most controversial people in the 50s because he wore, the way he dressed, which was tight leather pants, and the way he moved, the older generation did not want their children around it. They thought it was evil. And as you can see, they called him Striptease Presley. I couldn't find one article, I couldn't find a picture of it because the Chromebook wouldn't let me, but it said Elvis the Pelvis. It was scary to the public. And it led people to think, you know, should teenagers listen to rock and roll? And they rebelled and they said it's just a more revamped version of the Charleston, which was popular back in the 20s. And with rhythm and blues, you kind of had, moving into the early 60s, you had some girl groups like the Shirelles and the Crystals and some one-hit wonders like the Angels with My Boyfriend's Back. And some people altered older styles, like the Beach Boys. They used the style of Fats Domino, and they were able to create their own style of music, which was surf rock. And their first hit was I Get Around in 1963. And the British Invasion came in that same year with the Beatles, who came in the charts, knocking off the Beach Boys with I Want to Hold Your Hand. And the Beatles were popular for many, many years until their downfall when Lennon said that they were bigger than Jesus Christ. And as a lot of you may know, in the 60s, you had a bunch of stuff going on, whether it be the Civil Rights Movement or the assassination of President Kennedy, or the Vietnam era, or the Peace and Love War, excuse me. And during that time, a lot of protest songs were made, like Bob Dylan's "Like a Rolling Stone" or "The Times They Are Changing," Barry McGuire's "Eve of Destruction," and Aretha Franklin's "Respect," getting women empowerment. And poets and as my research paper called it, hippies came up with a new form of music called acid rock. And so you have hits like Jefferson Airplane with White Rabbit, or Tommy James and the Shondells with Crimson and Clover. So my first idea with my product was a 50s doo-wop quartet. I was discouraged at that because I didn't have enough proper experience. So I'm thinking to myself, how can I what can I do to make something fit into my research? And I'm like, well, Lennon said that he was bigger than Jesus Christ. And I myself, being a Baptist faith, and most of my family is, I decided to do a worship team at my church, the First Christian Church. Everything kind of fell into my hands. The only thing that didn't was there was like 9 or 10 people saying, oh, I want to do this. I'm really excited for this. And only one person ended up doing it. And whether it be schedule conflicts or conflicts with certain people, we made it work until she had to quit. She had to quit because she was in a drama club. And another challenge came in February when our piano player, Miss Glenda Kinch, her husband had unexpectedly passed away. So Miss Vicki Cooley had played the piano for us. So I had taken over at that point. I, along with my piano player, Miss Glenda Kinch, and Vicki Cooley, and Sabrina Parrish, we kind of picked it up from where we left off, and we made it another month or two. So, excuse me. So, excuse me. As the years go by, there is stuff that's going to change, and I think change can be a good thing or a bad thing. Now, I can see why some people think the newer generation of music is distasteful. Like I myself, if you saw me out there in the Bearston, I had a record player, I had records, I like the oldies. And that's just me, it's my own taste. And people can have differences. I'm not subjected to that. And I think that's wonderful because we're all human in the end and we all have different tastes. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions?
More about, just leave the one time at church?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. No, so we met once a week. Twice a week. Every week we sang hymns, and we went once a month, the first Sunday of the month, at First Christian Church, church over here, and we kind of sang and did our thing. I was wanting to get like new modernized Christian songs to get a reaction of the church. There wasn't a reaction. Was not a reaction. They didn't care. Yes.
How many different instruments do you play?
Oh, well, I'm in the band. So I came in late. I came my sophomore year, so they kind of stick. They don't really want to teach you anything. Sorry, Miss Hatch.
Don't be modest. You can play many things.
No, they didn't. They didn't. If you don't take band your 6th grade year, they'll stick you in percussion. And Mr. Cochran and Miss Jody Forbes taught me how to play the piano. So I played the piano. I can play anything within reason in percussion, except maybe a timpani. But other than that, I can play just about anything except a saxophone and a trumpet. Sorry, Logan.
How did your worship leader at church, did you visit every month?
One Sunday every month. And it was kind of, I asked them about it. It didn't take but a millisecond. They said yes. They said that young people need to be involved in the church, and I think that's something that needs to happen.
So did that go over well?
It did. They liked it. They loved it. They want me to do it again. They've been asking me for the last 2 months.
Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have.
So when you led this worship service, I'm just wondering, like, what was the structure of it?
The worship service?
Yes, like, I'm wondering how you chose the hymns to sing.
Oh,
Wondering, like, who was your audience? Did you just do it with kids? Did you do it with the general church membership?
so my church isn't really structured. Well, it's structured, but, well, now I got to think. My mind just left. But I do see what you're saying. I invited some of my friends in my choir class, because I'm in choir, and the church was all for that. And so I chose the songs that I knew well, which would be like Lily of the Valley, or You Washed in the Blood of the Lamb, or I Know Who Holds Tomorrow. Just some of the older hymnals, and kind of working our way up until Miss Glenda couldn't play. She's like, this is too fast for me. And I had wonderful teachers like Miss Dillon. She was there the first week, second week. Miss Hatch was there. And I was thankful for them being there. The first week, I had a whole row of teachers there with Miss James, Coach Mack, he came back. Miss Wilson was there. I know I'm forgetting a few, and that's terrible. but it was the whole row of teachers. Thank you.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
I'll take your mic.
Oh yeah, I can't leave that.
Oh, hi, Brian. Here, let me mic you up. Test that out so you see how it works. Breathing. Yeah, there's a couple more who are supposed to be coming, so, yep, there's one right there. Okay, thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that we are live streaming, so anything you say will be seen and heard on the video. If you haven't already, please silence your cell phones. Are you frozen? Do I need to turn this down? How's it feeling here to you? That's what matters.
Yes.
Judges, this is Brandon Henry, ID number 2429. Were you all able to reach the appropriate page?
Are my judges ready? There are over 1,000 Americans today that don't realize the safety or basics of welding that go into the process of welding. Hi, my name is Brandon Henry, and I made my senior project over the safety and basics of welding to teach you and others around about the main safeties that go into welding and the processes of certain welds and positions of welding. What led me to my topic was farming. I grew up on the farm, being around a lot of different things, which one being a welder, and I used the welder since I was 14, almost 15, and it taught me from then till now a lot about it. It's a lot of welding is outside, and I like being outside. A lot of different welding jobs are going to be outside, depending if you're going to be welding on the pipeline or in an industry or on bridges or such. And then I have tons of different knowledge for different welds and what they're used for and what different metals they need to be on, what voltages they need to be used for different welding, such as MIG, stick, or TIG. Those are the 3 basic welds that I learned and that I personally know the different voltages and what welding measures it needs to go on different metal. What's it used for? It's used in different things, but the main ones that I chose is industries. There's different welding industries. There could be welding industries that are you're just sitting in there welding parts onto a truck, a semi-truck for example, or you're sitting there welding blueprints down. There's other things it's used for auto body. You can weld hinges onto the door, you're welding exhaust, you're welding different pieces to either inside the doors or on the doors. Other things it's used for is bridges, such as, for example, the Golden State Bridge. There's lots of metal on that bridge. They put I-beams on there. The bolts and nuts are going to go on, but that's not going to support the capacity of vehicles, so they're going to have to weld down onto those. Farm work is another one that's used for a lot. Say a brush hog has a broken part, you're going to have to weld that back on. If it's not just a screw on or bolt on part, you might have to weld it on. On this one, these are the basic welds, MIG and stick and TIG. You're going to have 140 to 175 amps for MIG and 19 to 22 volts. For MIG, you can go higher, but you're risking the chances of either melting through your metal or splatter or porosity. For stick, you're going to have 75 to 125 amps and 10 to 50 volts. Like I said, you could go higher, but you're risking the chance of burning through or splatter, and you don't want that if you want a good weld, clean weld. TIG, you will use 80 to 100 amps with 80 different volts. TIG is one of the hardest welds that there is because you have to use both your hands. You can't just sit there and use one hand with like a MIG and stick you can. TIG is, you would have probably like this long of a brass or copper piece of metal, and then you have your welding gun in the other hand, and you put that down and let your gun heat up, and then you can weave position or move back and forth or drag it. The main safeties in welding would be clothing and gear. Clothing, you do not want to wear anything dry fit or stretchy because it could melt to your skin and cause different degree burns. You would going to wear long sleeves. It could be long sleeve shirt, long sleeve hoodie, jacket. It has to be 100% cotton. You can wear 100% cotton jeans or pants, and then boots, preferably cowboy boots and not work boots that have strings because the strings could still catch on fire. You don't want frays little pieces of phrase on the end of your pants or shirts because those could still catch on fire and ignite. The different gear that you would want is a welding helmet, gloves, those are your main ones that you're going to want, and safety glasses. You wear safety glasses underneath your helmet because in case metal can go flying through your welding helmet and there's still a protection on your eyes that can make it nothing happen to your eyes. While you're welding, you have to know your equipment and maintain your equipment. You have to know what you're working with, know what you're doing with it, know what it's called. So if somebody says that they need, for example, a chipping hammer, then you're gonna have to know where that's at. You're gonna have to know where and what it's used for. You have to maintain the equipment by, after every use, put it back where you found it so other people can use it. Or if it's yours, put it back somewhere, clean up your mess around your work area. You don't want tripping hazards in welding because there's gas used in the MIG. Tip dip is a process where it's a lubricant for MIG. It's only used in MIG. You would tip the top of your MIG gun in, then that'll lubricant the wire and the hole so the wire can come out smoothly, and then in the tip of the gun you don't get a bunch of metal particles or dirt all clumped up in there, then that'll clog the hole where your wire comes out, and then you're gonna take your tip off and clean it all out. It's just a process, and then tip dip, that's basically what prevents all that. Environmental safety would be ventilation. Ventilation could be open your garage door when you're welding, if you're welding in a garage or a big shop. Ventilation fans, that'll make all the smoke get sucked out so it's not a big smoke hazard inside where people don't gotta breathe all of it in. Some people can wear ventilation masks, but I prefer not to. With me, you get a ground voltage is a big one because that's what starts your spark, that's what starts your weld. You have to put it, clamp it next to the metal or around the metal or on the metal. That'll start it, and that's what basically creates your weld to make it go. You have to know what different welds you're doing. So for example, you can do pipe to flat, you can do T-joint, you can do overlap, or you can just do a plate, or you can do blueprint, or you can, the different positions in it would be overhead or just regular. When you're welding, you need to warn others while welding so you don't blind them because they can get welder burn, and it's not a very good thing. Trust me, because I've had it, and it's like sand in your eyes with like a lighter held to your eyes, and you cannot open your eyes, and it sucks. These are different pay rates around. I only chose Missouri. MIG welder you would make about 20 to 22 an hour, $40 to $55,000 a year. That's just depending what town and what area you're in. Stick and TIG, they're kind of the same thing, even though TIG's completely harder than stick and MIG. But they make about 26 to 30 an hour with $60 to $75,000 a year. A rig welder, there is some in Missouri, but they're not I wouldn't really call it a rig welder because rig welders, they go on the oil rigs, oil fields, and they're making a lot of money, 50 to 60 an hour to $96,000 to $115,000 a year. And a combo welder is just a basic welder. You're going around welding little pieces to a blueprint, or I guess I would call that kind of an auto body kind of welder. You make 20 to 23 an hour, $30 to $40,000 a year. That's like not supposed to be. My bad. My process was I had to find the right metal, make sure it wasn't too thick, because then I don't want to carry it around all the time, and then it's too heavy. I want it to be not too thin because then I couldn't weld it at all because it would melt completely through no matter what weld I did. Had to find the right weld, whether it was stick or MIG. I did stick first and then it melted through, so I had to restart my process over, getting cutting wheel on the grinder and cut it off and then MIG it. And then after that, I had to make sure that my voltages were completely right and not too hot, not too cold, because if you want cold, then they're going to bubble up and your welds are not going to be pretty at all. You have to make sure you're comfortable while welding so you don't have to move around and then stop your weld and then start on, because while you do that, you can see where you stopped and then where you started. Your hood darkness is a big part of it. You have to make sure that it's not too dark where you can't see anything. You have to make sure it's not too light where it's going to blind you. You have to make sure it's just right. I set it at 10. 10 is a perfect darkness for welding. And these are the pictures that I have, and the far one over there, I was welding one of the panels. There's little corners right here. I was welding one of those over there, the same one in the middle one. And then in this picture, that magnet was holding the fire pit, and I was tacking it. And that's what I did for my product was I built the fire pit. It's in the bear's den. You guys can see it if you want after I'm done. But this is what I was doing. I was tacking it. Tacking it is a weld where you just put little welds down, so you don't have to hold the metal or use magnets to hold the metal. You can just tack it, and then when it's completely tacked, you can complete your welds where you don't have to hold it and worry about stopping and starting again. The challenges I had was it melted through because I used stick, like I said previously. The metal was completely way too thin. In the description where I ordered it from, it said that it was appropriate in thickness for a stick, but can't always trust all that. I had to grind the metal completely after I got welded and then see if that would make it better because there's holes in it. So I just decided to get a cutting wheel on a grinder, cut it again, then smooth it out, and then I welded it all back together. And then I MIG'd it. That's what I welded it with after stick. I MIG welded it, which MIG weld you can use on thinner metal because it's not as hot as a stick weld, because a stick weld has an electrode that will just melt down, and it gets hotter at times. These are the recommended amperages for stick welding. So if you use, for example, a 6010 to a 6011 rod, you can, like a 3 out of 32 diameter in inches, you would need 40 to 80 voltages. And these are all the different tools and the main ones you use in welding. The top one over there would be a chipping hammer. Chipping hammer would be used only in basic stick weld because it has slag after you get done welding it. And then your wire brush can be used in any weld, but it's mainly used in stick welding because the slag so it gets stuck in the little crevices, so you can use that and to get it out. A welding helmet that's used in any welding, no matter what. Welding gloves, you would need thick ones, not no thin ones, because then the thin ones can melt. The thick gloves help heat on your hands, help sparks not get on your hands, helps your hands not get burnt. You can move the metal real quick. Don't hold it because the gloves will start smoking and catch on fire. This is your voltage clamp. Voltage clamp, there's little holes in the welder. You'll plug that into the welder, then turn your welder on, and that's what makes your sparks ignite for your welder. And then far over there is your MIG gun. Same thing, you plug it in here. And at the bottom, the brass wire, that's the wire rule. The wire will feed through the wire in the MIG, and then you put that down, and then you can continue to weld. The middle one is called a stinger. That's you clamp it, unclamp it, and the little grooves in it, you'll put the end of the gray electrodes in there, and then that's how you set up that one. TIG is a lot complicated. There's this hose, it like kind of like bubble, like flattens up, and then the tip where that pink thing's at, it'll heat up, and then you have that in one hand, and you know just kind of weave your weld. Then you'll use argon and carbon monoxide in MIG welding. It's a gas welding, so it's a lot dangerous because there's gas. So if you bump over and hit one of those, and those fall on the ground, those can explode or ignite and hit somebody or hurt someone or even hurt everyone around you. Then these are some other little ones. You got a grinder, you have grinding disc and cutting wheel disc. Your safety glasses, the big one, you always wear safety glasses in the shop no matter what. These are your electrodes. You have your square, your marker to measure out your metal and degrees, what you want to weld if you're using a blueprint. Then you'll have your magnet if you need to hold up your weld if you don't want to tack it. Then you have your clamp to like clamp down your metal down if you want to not hold it. It's another thing, you could use a magnet or that. A tape measure to measure out what you need to what you need to weld and what you need to do if you're using a blueprint. And then you have your welder. This is just a carry travel welder. You can carry it and go wherever you want. You don't have to haul it around. And that's really all you really need in any sort of welding. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions?
Gonna be a career for you?
Yeah, I plan on doing this after high school.
School for that?
Yeah.
Have you already been going?
No, I'm looking for trade school, but I don't know which one yet. Anyone else?
So if you were do the product again, what would you?
I would definitely make sure that the metal was not that thin. And if it's that thin, I know now to MIG weld it so I don't have to restart the whole process over again.
What material were you making?
Stainless steel. Yeah, that's why it melted when I stick welded.
I thought it was a different material.
Yeah,
Yes, was it ever
I think if it was like steel and it was that thin, I feel like it wouldn't have melted through. Thank you. Let me just.
Oops, sorry, didn't mean to shock you. Thank you, sir. Yep. It's all over. Come on in. Nice suit. We are gonna, I'll move this a little bit. We're gonna put this over here in the corner. And we want you in between the tape at all times. So I think here would be a good position, but you don't want to block the screen or your poster. I'm gonna mic you up. Go ahead and test this out. Well, that's not what was supposed to happen.
Oh, okay, well, that's weird. So that,
Huh. Let me see that.
oh no, I gotta go off with an A. Bummer. Hmm? Favorite word. So I come back tomorrow, same time. I don't have to. The hands and feet behind the lens. I'm sure I whip something out. Just my luck. It's fine. Print them out.
Hey, Isaac, I think we crashed. I have a slideshow that won't load.
Technical difficulties.
Well, while we're waiting for Isaac to come over here and check this out, I just wanted to remind everybody we are live streaming video and audio. Also, if you haven't, please make sure that your cell phones are silent. Judges, this is Alex Moritz, ID number 2455. Let me know if you have where you're supposed to be. Okay. Neither one.
It's close enough. Hmm? Yeah. Only 7. I wanted to give a minimum. I'll mention this in my speech, but I wanted to give a minimum of 10, and I only came up short with 7. But it's not about how many people sign up; it's about who does. So. Hmm? No. Yeah, that could be Mr. Jackson. Okay.
Yeah, they'll be finished. Maybe less. Nobody's in Dr. Travis's room?